Morning, kiddos. Week 7, day 1. Our reading passage for today is called Why Do Cavefish Lose Their Eyes? And it's from the American Museum of Natural History. All right. There are caves deep under the ground where the sun never shines. The only light that enters these caves is from the headlamps of cave explorers. If you went inside of one of these caves and turned off your headlamp, you would see nothing at all. There would be no shadows or shapes, just blackness. In some of these caves, there are organisms that live without light. They include salamanders, crustaceans, and fish. In fact, more than 100 species of cave fish live in darkness for their whole lives. They depend on senses other than sight to hunt, eat, and reproduce. These fish have evolved or developed over many generations to live without light. Many of these species of fish are blind or nearly blind. Some of them don't even have eyes, yet they all evolved from fish that could see. Somehow, over millions of years, these fish both lost the ability to see and gained the ability to live without sight. How did this happen? How can evolution cause a species to lose a trait? It's a mystery that scientists have been trying to solve. Their search for an answer gives us a fascinating look at how evolution works. Regressive evolution. We usually think of evolution as a process in which species gain new traits. But in cavefish, we have an example of regressive evolution. Regressive means going backwards. And regressive evolution is a process in which species lose a trait. In this case, the trait is the ability to see. A common belief is that the ancestors of cavefish went blind in their evolution because they didn't use their eyes. This idea might seem to make sense at first, but it has no basis in science. Genes determine which traits are inherited. For example, the fact that you have 5 fingers on each hand is because the genes you inherited from your parents. However, if you lose a finger in an accident, your children will still be born with 5 fingers on each hand. If you lift weights and become a bodybuilder, it doesn't mean your children will be born with big muscles. In each of these examples, your body has changed but your genes haven't. Darwin is stumped. The fact that the ancestors of cavefish didn't use their eyes had no effect on their genes. Yet at some point in the past, something clearly happened to their genes that stopped the development of their eyes. This new condition passed on from parent to offspring. How can this sort of regressive evolution be explained? Even the scientists who established a modern understanding of evolution have trouble answering this question. That scientist was Charles Darwin, who lived in the 19th century. At the time when he was born, DNA hadn't been discovered, so he didn't know about genes or their role in the inheritance of traits. But he understood that traits were inherited. He also knew that differences within a species give some individuals an advantage over others. Animals with traits that make them more successful at having offspring will pass on those traits to the following generations. He called this process evolution by natural selection. However, Darwin had trouble applying his theory of natural selection to the question of why some cavefish are blind. He could not explain how being blind gave those cavefish an advantage. And if being blind is not an advantage, then how did natural selection lead to a species of blind cavefish? Darwin's answer was that cavefish lost their eyes because they didn't use them. His answer was a Lamarckian explanation. Today, scientists know that this explanation is wrong. 2 answers. Most of what we know now is based on the study of one species of cavefish. This species is the Mexican tetra. Scientists after Darwin have come up with 2 possible explanations for blindness in this cavefish. The explanations probably apply to other cavefish as well. The first hypothesis is that blindness gives the fish an evolutionary advantage. For example, it's possible that changes in the gene or genes that caused blindness also cause some other changes in the fish that is helpful. Scientists call changes in genes mutations. Scientists also have a word for when the same mutation in one gene has more than one effect. The word is pleiotropy. Sorry, that's a tough one. To support the first hypothesis, scientists should have to look for some advantage to the fish that is connected with the same mutation that causes blindness. The second hypothesis that could explain blindness in the cavefish also has to do with evolution. Natural selection does not just reward success and preserve traits that give some animals an advantage. It also gets rid of failures. To understand the second hypothesis, picture a lake where there is sunlight. In this lake, a fish that is born blind would have trouble competing with other fish that can see. It probably would not survive to have offspring. But a fish that is born blind in the water of a dark cave would not be at a disadvantage compared to a fish that could see. This is because the eyes are useless in the dark. In such an environment, natural selection will not work to get rid of the mutation for blindness. Over 1 to 2 million years, many more mutations interfering with the development of eyes will occur and add up. After a while, the whole population of fish in the cave will be blind. This is called the neutral mutation hypothesis. It is based on the idea that the mutations that cause blindness have a neutral effect, an effect that is neither good nor bad, on the survival of a fish living in a dark cave. An eye-opening experiment. A group of scientists set out to study the causes of blindness in the cavefish. They carried out an experiment with 2 varieties of the same species of Mexican tetras. One variety of tetras live near the surface of the water that gets sunlight. This variety can see. The other variety lives in water in the dark caves and is blind. The scientists took a lens from the eye of a surface tetra embryo and put it into the eye of the cave tetra embryo. The result was striking. The new lens in the cave tetra caused all of the tissues around it to develop into a healthy eye. This experiment showed that even though the eye of the tetra had stopped working, the genes involved in eye development still worked. The results suggest that the neutral mutation hypothesis is wrong, because if blindness was caused by many neutral mutations adding up over time, the new lens would not have resulted in the development of a healthy eye. The scientists knew that there are many genes in charge of the development of each part of an eye, such as the lens, the iris, and the retina. The scientists also knew that each part of the eye develops on its own. However, the results of the experiment showed that blindness in the cave tetra was not due to mutation in all those genes. Instead, it suggests a small number of mutations in genetic master switches. These master switches are genes that control the function of many other genes. In this case, some of the genes controlled by the master switches were in charge of eye development. These master switches can deactivate the eye gene so that the genes are still intact but not doing anything. Putting a healthy lens into the cave tetra embryo seems to cause master switches to send a signal to the deactivated eye genes. The eye genes are then turned on and the cave tetra develops eyes. If the scientists could find the master switches that made cave tetras blind, they could find out whether the same switches have effects on other traits of the fish that do give it an evolutionary advantage for surviving in caves. The scientists did indeed find one of those genes. It is nicknamed hedgehog, or the HH gene. They discovered that this gene does more than cause blindness in the cave tetras. When the fish develops without eyes, the skull bones move into the empty eye socket. When the bones move into the eye socket, the fish's nose becomes bigger. In this way, it could be the same master switch the HH gene, capital H, lowercase h, that stops eye development in the fish is also responsible for improving its sense of smell. An improved sense of smell would be an advantage for a fish that lives in the dark. As a result of this experiment and others, it now seems likely that blindness in cave tetras is in part the result of pleiotropy. That is because the same mutation in one gene, the master switch, has more than one effect: blindness and an improved sense of smell. Evolution works. Scientists are still studying cavefish, and new discoveries are sure to be made. But it is already clear where the answer to this question will be found. The answer will be found in the basic process of evolution that are already well understood. With new tools that give scientists the ability to map genes, find mutations, and understand the development of embryos, we are increasing our understanding of how evolution works. All right, that's your reading passage. No vocabulary for today, so up next will be your questions. See you in a minute.